What is up, guys? Fatal82 coming at you with some footage talking about slavery in Rust. So to be specific, this is talking about in Rust, not real life, so please don't get butthurt and don't bring politics into it. Slave is a term that is often used in Rust to refer to as workers or players who perform utilitarian functions such as gathering resources, hitting trees, maybe building bases, doing stuff that is going to be very common. Larger groups will use players to be able to do this to get big compounds going, and even smaller players will advertise for slaves in chat to get extra work, and that's typically done in exchange for something. So it could be in exchange to learn some blueprints, or to live at a larger base, or to have protection, or sometimes to learn the game. I think slaving can be an effective method to learn the game if you hook up with the right group, like CML for instance that we're taking a look at here. CML has probably the most sophisticated and advanced slave system that I've seen in vanilla Rust, and they operate in a manner here where the slaves are their own distinct culture away from the main group. So they're part of the main group, but they're also distinct. They will live in the outskirts of the compound, but they will not have access to the main base, and they're supervised at all times from members of the greater group of CML. They have foremen or team leaders who will take out the slaves on mining runs. That's what you're taking a look at here. This is one full mining run that I've pieced together. So they'll go out through the landscape, they'll hit the nodes, and they'll bring them back to the main base, the resources they've acquired, back to the slave base rather, put them in there, and later on they'll be picked up by members of CML and used however it's going to benefit the larger group. In terms of the slaves, they are allowed to have a certain uniform here, which is comprised of cloth armor. They can augment that with any type of armor that would fit over the cloth, but they always have to be wearing the cloth. So they can use bone, wood armor, even metal chest plates if necessary, but they have to always have their uniform on as well. The biggest benefit they get here is they are part of the larger group and they get to live in the compound. And as you can see, CML puts their slaves to very good use because the resources they gather goes right back into the security of that compound. So to fortify it, to honeycomb it, to make it all the more sprawling is really the effective use of slaves, and CML has it down to a science. As you can see here, the slaves live in their own distinct base that does have a ominous overtone to it because there are some prison gateways and cells there, and they do sleep under the foundations on a dirt floor. So it's a very humble lifestyle, but one that does make you part of a greater group. So again, if you're a newer player and you can hook up with a group like this, they're probably going to be able to teach you a lot about Rust. In the process of gathering resources, you're going to be talking with the players, hopefully learning the systems in the game, learning how to play Rust, and picking up some tips and tricks along the way. CML slaves are always ready for combat. They don't have many resources with them, but their bases are stocked with a limited number of weapons to defend against a raid. So when shit hits the fan, they'll take up defensive positions, and their base actually acts as an auxiliary flank tower to support that main compound as well. This is some footage one wipe after the ones we were looking at before. So it's right after the start of the wipe, and CML's working hard to get their base up and running. You can see that main base we just saw a glimpse of a moment ago didn't yet have all the high exterior stone walls we typically come to expect from CML. But you can see the slaves are out in full force here. They sleep together, they live together, they do everything together, so they're a very close group of players, and it's very fascinating to see them work together. It's taken me a while to piece this footage together, and I've wanted to do a video on it for a while. So one of the biggest benefits also to being a slave in CML is that you're going to have access to the resources of the greater group. So you can see here that the slaves are getting hassled by some bandits who came in from the hills, and the slaves aren't as combat effective as other Rust players, typically because they're more focused on resource, so they don't carry with them lots of defensive options or offensive options even. But you can see here that a member of CML was ready up in one of the flank towers here to provide assistance to his slaves to keep them safe, and that's something that is always a good thing. So typically slaving will start off in a shit shack, as we're taking a look at there. That was Dank Scrotum Shit Shack. And slaves are recruited through chat. You'll see people actively asking to be a slave, and then you'll see people actively recruiting for a slave, such as this individual here. Before he got confirmation, he wasn't building this, but as soon as he got confirmation some slaves were on the way, he threw together his own little shit shack here. And that's comprised of using minimal amount of resources to have a place for slaves to spawn into and a place where they can operate out of. He's throwing down some sleeping bags, and the first slave has spawned in here. At this point in time, he's going to tell them what the expectations are, and it looks as though as soon as they spawned in, he had the slaves at gunpoint, give him a double BJ, which we're not going to show here, so we'll pan out there. He then locked him in the house here while he went back to the main base and gathered some resources for the slaves to begin their mining expedition. So keep in mind, guys, all slave situations in Rust will not be equal. Some will be more oppressive than others, exploitative than others. So bear in mind, you can always opt out of it at any point in time. As of right now in Rust, there's no way to force it on people, so there's no way to force someone to be a slave. So the slaves rolled out without the protection of their slave master here or any additional clan members. They're left to their own devices while a strange man in a pumpkin head watches their every movement. As the slaves are out gathering resources, working hard, their slave master, if you will, is back at the main base. And he's putting some resources back into the base. He's putting down more sleeping bags. His slave business is becoming booming by promising to exchange blueprints in chat. He put a sign on his base that made reference to a Nazi concentration camp, which we're not going to show the sign, to be respectful. And then he also built an additional layer onto the slave base here, which had a furnace in it. So this was not trending in a good direction, guys. This was taking on some dark tones here, starting with a double BJ and ending with the reference to the Nazi concentration camp and the furnace. I don't think things are going to go too well for these particular players, these particular slaves. But I think that someone knew that, because as soon as the door opens here, arrows come flying in, actually taking out one of the slaves, putting him out of perhaps his misery. And it was the individual in that pumpkin helmet. I think he was a former slave who escaped and wanted some retribution. So, as always, guys, really hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think of this concept in Rust. As always, Fado82, peace.
Your name, boy. Toby. Toby's your